What you know what? Just to be safe. Thing you did ended up saving your ass later? About 10 years ago when I was married, my wife's best friend kept on flirting with me. One time when she was being super aggressive, I recorded it on my cell phone. A few months later, she accused me of saying to her the very things that she said to me. One listen from my wife to my phone completely exonerated me and shut her down completely. She was trying to ruin my marriage because hers was crappy. So, ex-best friend, right? Flipped over my shoe and shook it, 'cause I had found a spider in it the night before, just to make sure. There was another spider in there. Saving a receipt for a campus parking ticket I paid for during my freshman year of college. They do this thing where they double the ticket amount after a month of not paying. I paid it the week I got it, stuffed the receipt in my bag and forgot about it. Apparently, whoever was in charge of clearing me didn't, and I was told I had an unpaid, doubled parking ticket on my account after like 3 months when I tried to settle up tuition for the semester. Disputed that, and wore a smug-ass look on my face as I directly reached in my bag and pulled the receipt out to show them. I mean otherwise, I would've had to essentially pay the ticket 3 times. Something tells me it's not the first time that's happened to students there. I've written about this before, but here goes. 4 students of mine won the first prize for a project they did and we all got a free trip to London. We had spent the day sightseeing and were exhausted, so we got an ice cream and sat on a bench in a park to relax. A couple of minutes later I noticed this couple walk by slowly, staring at us. My spidey senses go mental. I do not like these people for some reason. She walks by and sits on the bench next to ours and he sits on the bench across from hers. They aren't talking, just looking at each other. And that is when I notice her reaching into her pockets. I jump up, grab my students and run out of the park. My poor students are confused AF and wondering WTF is wrong with me, when all of a sudden we hear screaming. Turns out she stabbed a couple walking through the park, trying to rob them. It scares the ever-loving duck out of me knowing had I not gotten my students out of there, we would have been stabbed and robbed. #X200B, edit, for all those trying to turn this into a racial shit show, everyone involved in this incident was white. I booked a vacation for my wife's birthday in Cabo San Lucas months in advance. For some reason as I was booking it I decided to get the trip insurance. I had never done that before, but time this I thought I better do it. Our trip was to be in October. I booked it in June. The beginning of September a hurricane struck Cabo and did a lot of damage. I contacted the resort and they said they were not very badly affected. I left the reservation booked. The day before we were to fly to Cabo I checked the flights and everything was good to go. We got to the airport and as we were checking the woman checking in said, "Oh, there's a problem with your connecting flight." Yeah, the problem was the connecting flight had been cancelled over a month ago. Yeah, Expedia neglected to tell us that little bit of info. I was able to recoup all of the money we spent because of the insurance. Those booking websites like Expedia and hotels are horrible. I used to use them because I figured the cost difference would be very minimal and it was convenient for me. But then I recently decided to try booking directly instead of with a booking website and it ended up costing me $200 less for 5 nights at a hotel. Was remodeling my house, took out a loan and had to get the house appraised to get the loan. Found that my house was worth $100K more than I had it insured for. Raised my limits on the home insurance to $50K more than the appraised value in anticipation of completing renovations. 2 weeks later house burned to the ground due to a faulty bathroom fan that I did not touch. City, insurance company and loan company all sent separate investigators due to how shady it looked. I can't speak for the city, but I can say that the insurance company and the loan company, which has its own insurance, would have sent out an inspection for that regardless of the circumstances due to the dollar amount of the claim. Skepticism, and an attitude of trust but verify are simply baked into the job. Source, was an underwriter for a major insurance company. A tropical storm was blowing through my city a few months ago and we were projected to get some wind gusts and significant rain. Because our parking lot isn't large enough for all staff and our clients, a lot of us have to park on the street, which is lined with large, old trees. As I rolled up on the morning we were due to get the storm, I parked in my usual spot down the block. Before I shut the car off, though, I noticed that this particular spot was located directly across the street from one of the largest trees on the block. Thinking, you know what? Just to be safe, I put the car in reverse and backed up about 10 feet, safely out of the direct line of fire from any trees. In the middle of that afternoon, in the midst of the howling wind and driving rain, we heard a huge thud down the street. Went to investigate, and that same tree I'd been parked across the street from fell across the road and missed my car by about 8 feet. At that moment, I was glad that I decided to play it safe. The car parked on the other side of the street directly across from where I'd initially been got absolutely destroyed. Crushed roof, windows blown out, just pulverized. We had similar a few years ago, but it was my professor. He parked under a tree and came to teach us. During the lecture the winds picked up and he turned around and said, "Well, I had a gut feeling I shouldn't park in my usual spot, but I ignored it. That may have been a mistake." Turns out it was. Tree toppled and totaled his car. Girl I knew in college, many years ago. Her folks bought her one of those Mercedes sedans. She parked beside the old university residence, very picturesque Victorian building with rock walls and a big slate roof. I was walking by a few hours later when she was getting her car towed. An iceberg about a foot thick, 10 by 6 feet, had slid off the steep, poorly insulated roof and flattened the front half of her car. The administration roped off the first 15 feet from the building until spring after that. An iceberg. I spent extra money on Kevlar motorcycle gloves, a lot more expensive but 5 times more durable. When I later on crashed with my sports motorcycle, I slid the first stretch of meters on the palms of my hands, and feet and knees, before I started rolling, etc. I had a car sitting on jack stands because I needed to do some transmission work. Before climbing under it, I thought it'd be a good idea to rock the car around. One of the jack stands was not in the right spot and the car slipped off it, slamming down on the front disc brakes. Would have killed me. One of my coworkers died earlier this year from this very thing. You were good to check. Last year this happened to my father with the front wheels off. The truck came down dead center on his chest, but he was able to crawl out somehow and walk into the house to tell my mother he needs to go to the ER. My father is one of the toughest guys I've ever met, but he was crying in pain when they made him lift his arms above his head for the x-ray. He ended up with 5 broken ribs and dislocated shoulder from prying himself free. Could have been so much worse if he was only an inch or two closer to the front. Working in an electric panel, I went over to check to make sure the disconnect was off. It wasn't. I was being careful either way, not getting near the high voltage stuff, but it didn't need to be on, and could have easily killed myself with one mistake. This happened yesterday. Electricity, water and wild animals are the 3 things you don't duck with in this world. You must be terrified of electric eels. I was 19 and home for the summer from college. I had a contraband bottle of Bacardi stashed in my bedroom under a pile of clothes and other stuff between my bed and the window. My grandfather appears in a dream and sits me down with this bottle to chew me out, not for having booze as a kid, but for hiding it so poorly. I wake up, a bit disturbed by this dream, and throw the bottle of Bacardi in a duffel bag and toss that in the trunk of my car as I leave for work. Get home that evening, and the pile it had been stashed under was moved as my mom had set up a table with a fan by the window to get air moving. Grew up in northern Y without AC. Wouldn't have been a fun rest of the summer had I been busted with that. I bought a used Subaru Baja that was 5 years old at the time and had 75k miles for $12,000. The salesman offered an extended warranty that covered the engine for $2,500, would last 3 years, 36k miles. That was kind of a lot, and I usually don't buy those. I don't know what got into me that day, but I said sure. 1 month and 750 miles later, after an oil change at a mechanic shop, oil started shooting into the pistons. I'm not good with cars. Oil went where it wasn't supposed to go. Completely ruined the engine and turbo. The dealer had to keep it for 3 weeks. The warranty company flew someone out to inspect the car, and eventually approved a replacement engine, turbo, and any other affected parts. Total repairs cost almost $11,000, and the warranty then applied to all the new parts too. Car drove like it was brand new. Later discovered the car had 5 previous owners before me, but I couldn't find any accident or serious repair history. This is probably the only time buying an extended warranty on something actually worked out in my favor. Oil went where it wasn't supposed to go. That about sums up my knowledge of cars. Glad it worked out for you.